In the last decade, the Philippines has emerged as one of the most active defense importers in Southeast Asia. From South Korea's Fa-50 fighter jets to India's BrahMos coastal defense missiles, from Brazil's Guarani armored vehicles to Israel's radar and drone systems, the country has assembled a patchwork of foreign technology to rebuild its military. Yet beneath the headlines of new contracts lies a deeper realization. Manila cannot depend forever on external suppliers. The next phase of modernization, known as Horizon 3, will test whether the Philippines can move from being an arms consumer to becoming a defense producer. For most of its modern history, the armed forces of the Philippines have had no real industrial base. Almost every weapon system in service was imported, assembled abroad, or donated by allies. The state-owned government arsenal in Bataan produces only small-caliber ammunition, rifles, and basic components. Its annual capacity is minuscule compared with regional peers. Less than 10% of military equipment can be serviced or maintained domestically. As a result, the Philippines often finds itself waiting months for spare parts, training, or technical support from foreign partners. This lack of industrial independence is a structural weakness that has persisted through multiple modernization programs since 1995. Recognizing this vulnerability, the Department of National Defense began in 2025 to push for a new framework, the Defense Industry Development Act. The proposed law would establish the Defense Industry Development Authority, or DIDA, as the central agency responsible for coordinating investments, approving partnerships, and supervising technology transfers. In effect, it aims to create what South Korea built in the 1980s, a hybrid ecosystem linking state procurement, private enterprise, and foreign expertise. The logic is clear. Modern warfare now depends as much on logistics and sustainment as on battlefield strength. A country that cannot manufacture ammunition or repair its own vehicles will not last long in a protracted crisis. The economic dimension of this initiative is equally important. The Philippines currently spends about 1.1% of its gross domestic product on defense, with the modernization budget hovering around 700 million United States dollars per year. This level of funding cannot sustain an import-based strategy indefinitely. Hence, the government is considering opening the defense sector to private and foreign capital. Under the proposed framework, investors could hold up to 40% equity in local defense enterprises, while the majority stake would remain Filipino-controlled. The idea is to blend domestic oversight with external capital and technology, a formula that allowed South Korea and Poland to transform their defense industries within 2 decades. Initial industrial priorities are modest but realistic. Manila plans to expand the government arsenal's capacity to produce small arms ammunition and begin localized assembly for vehicles such as the Guaranis and M113 upgrades. A second track involves electronic systems, radar components, fire control modules, and communication suites for missile and air defense networks. Cooperation with India and South Korea could yield limited technology transfer in these areas, particularly around BrahMos missile maintenance and radar calibration. The third pillar concerns naval repair. By partnering with Hyundai Heavy Industries, the Philippines hopes to modernize shipyards capable of maintaining its growing surface fleet. Collectively, These initiatives aim to ensure that by 2030, at least 30% of AFP equipment can be produced or sustained locally. However, the obstacles are immense. Budgetary constraints remain the most immediate problem. Developing a modern defense industry requires long-term state guarantees, research funding, and incentives for private firms, none of which are yet institutionalized. Technological dependence is another barrier. Most of the Philippines' partners guard sensitive technologies closely. Few will transfer manufacturing rights for advanced systems. Legal hurdles also persist. The country still lacks comprehensive export control and licensing laws for defense products, limiting its ability to engage in international supply chains. And politically, there is limited public understanding of why investing in defense industry yields economic and strategic returns. Many lawmakers still view such spending as an unnecessary luxury rather than a tool of national resilience. Regionally, the Philippines is entering a race that its neighbors began decades earlier. Indonesia's PT Pindad has been producing armored vehicles and ammunition since the 1980s, and now exports to Africa and the Middle East. Vietnam's Z-111 and Z-Da-25 factories have developed their own line of small arms and dual-use technologies. Thailand's Defense Technology Institute collaborates with European partners to build artillery systems and unmanned aircraft. These examples show that a small or medium-sized economy can, through consistent policy and local foreign partnerships, establish a sustainable defense ecosystem. The Philippines is starting late, but it can learn from these models, especially in leveraging civilian industries such as automotive and electronics as stepping stones. At the strategic level, the Defense Industry Development Authority represents more than an economic project. It is an attempt to harden the Philippines against external coercion. In a potential South China Sea crisis, Manila could face disruptions to foreign supply chains and spare parts delivery. A minimal domestic manufacturing capability would provide strategic endurance, the ability to sustain operations even under blockade or diplomatic pressure. This industrial self-sufficiency does not aim to match China's vast military-industrial complex, but to narrow the vulnerability gap. China's strength lies in production scale and speed. The Philippines, by contrast, seeks resilience, the capacity to repair, reload, and recover without depending entirely on distant suppliers. The geopolitical balance adds further weight to this ambition. China's defense industry integrates civilian innovation with military needs through state-owned conglomerates, allowing rapid mobilization. Every drone, radar, or shipyard doubles as a military asset. For Manila, the lesson is sobering. Without an industrial foundation, national sovereignty remains fragile. By developing its own small but steady production base, the Philippines can ensure that its modernization does not collapse the moment imports stop flowing. This is not an arms race, but an insurance policy, a bid for strategic survival. If successfully implemented, the Defense Industry Development Act could begin a gradual transformation. The first phase, expected around 2026, would formalize the DIDA structure and regulatory framework. By 2028, pilot factories for ammunition and vehicle maintenance could come online. By 2030, the country might be assembling its own armored vehicles, refurbishing missile systems, and producing small-scale components for regional export. Even limited achievements would mark a turning point. For the first time since independence, the Philippines would possess a genuine defense industrial base, something that links its military strength with its economic capability. Ultimately, the true measure of this effort will not be counted in factories or machines, but in strategic autonomy. A nation that can build and repair its own weapons gains leverage in both diplomacy and deterrence. For Manila, this is a long road, but the first steps are underway. The lesson from modern conflicts is clear. Wars are not only won by armies, but by industries that can outlast them. The Philippines may never match the industrial giants of Asia, but if it can stand on its own feet, manufacturing, maintaining, and sustaining its defense, it will have already secured the most fundamental form of sovereignty. In the end, this industrial awakening represents more than modernization. It is a declaration that the Philippines intends to endure, adapt, and defend itself in an increasingly contested Indo-Pacific. Its future strength will not just depend on imported missiles or foreign-built ships, but on the quiet hum of machines inside Filipino factories, turning steel, electronics, and ambition into a new kind of national power